Sandra, step away from the workstation.
I'm in the middle of charting.
We need to talk about the patient account access logs from after hours.
What check charts?
Multiple withdrawals unauthorized over a long period.
Sandra Lynn Castillo, 41 years old. Licensed practical nurse at Sunrise Manor Care Facility in Tucson, Arizona. And in less than 30 seconds, she will be placed in handcuffs in front of a hallway of elderly residents she had been stealing from for 6 years.
Oh, that's not. I've been covering shift.
Turn around, please. Hands behind your back.
You're making a mistake. I didn't hurt anyone.
Within 72 hours of this footage, investigators would seize records from 11 separate bank accounts, a storage unit containing designer goods worth over $84,000, and a laptop holding 6 years of falsified patient financial documents. 31 criminal charges. $1.3 million. 23 elderly victims, the youngest 71, the oldest 94. Most of them with dementia or Alzheimer's, none of them capable of noticing what was being done to them. Sandra Lynn Castillo had been appointed as a trusted financial contact for each of these residents. She used that access to quietly drain their accounts, savings built over lifetimes, funds meant for rent, medications, and care, and spend it on herself. She did it for 6 years. And she almost got away with it. Before we continue, do you have an elderly parent or relative in a care facility? Do you know who has access to their finances? Let us know in the comments. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now is the time. We cover cases like this every single week, stories of betrayal inside the institutions people trust most. Sandra Lynn Castillo was born in June 1982 in Nogales, Arizona, a border town split in half by a steel fence, where the American side was known for its copper industry retirees and the steady hum of cross-border commerce. Her mother, Gloria, worked the overnight shift at a hotel laundry on Grand Avenue for 22 years, folding sheets while her children slept. Her father, Ernesto, drove a delivery truck for a regional food distributor. He was on the road 4 days a week. He smelled like diesel and brought home gas station candy when he could. Sandra was the oldest of 3. She shared a bedroom with her 2 younger sisters in a 2-bedroom house on Arroyo Drive. The carpet had a stain shaped like Florida that her mother could never fully get out. Money was managed carefully, never wasted. Gloria kept a handwritten budget in a spiral notebook she stored under the kitchen sink, next to the cleaning supplies. There was always just enough. What Sandra had, what everyone who knew her from those early years would tell you, was a heart for people who couldn't take care of themselves. Neighbors remembered her sitting with Mr. Salazar from 2 doors down, reading the newspaper to him after his wife died. Her 6th-grade teacher wrote on a report card, "Sandra shows remarkable patience and genuine compassion for others. She will do something meaningful." She graduated from Rio Rico High School in 2000 with a 3.1 GPA and enrolled immediately in the Certified Nursing Assistant program at Pima Community College. She wanted to be a nurse. Not for the money. The money was not good, and she knew that going in. She wanted to do what she was already doing for free, care for people who had no one else. She completed her LPN licensure in 2003. Her clinical supervisor wrote at the end of her placement, "Sandra is calm under pressure, deeply empathetic with elderly patients, and consistently goes above what is required. She is exactly who you want in this field." Her first job was at Desert Vista Nursing and Rehabilitation Center in Tucson. $14.25 an hour, rotating shifts, constant physical and emotional demands. She worked there for 5 years. The reviews were glowing. She was promoted to charge nurse for the memory care wing in 2007. In 2015, she accepted a position at Sunrise Manor Care Facility, a 96-bed skilled nursing facility on the east side of Tucson. Starting pay, $24.80 an hour. Her supervisor during onboarding described her as professional, warm, and clearly experienced with high-needs populations. She was, by every visible measure, exactly the kind of nurse this facility needed. She knew the residents by name. She knew their preferences, who liked the window blind open, who needed their water warm, who got anxious during shift changes. The families of residents noticed. They left cards and cookies at the nurse's station with her name written on the envelope. No one imagined she was stealing from the people in those rooms. To understand how Sandra Castillo stole $1.3 million from 23 elderly patients over 6 years, you first have to understand how financial management works inside long-term care facilities, and why it is uniquely vulnerable to exactly this kind of theft. Arizona state law allows, and in some cases requires, care facilities to designate staff members as representative payees or authorized financial contacts for residents who cannot manage their own finances. These are typically patients with moderate to severe cognitive decline, Alzheimer's disease, advanced dementia, or other conditions that prevent them from tracking or accessing their own money. The system is designed to protect these residents. Someone needs to manage their Social Security checks, their pension deposits, their bank accounts, to make sure rent to the facility gets paid, medications get purchased, personal needs get covered. The intent is entirely protective. But here is how it works in practice. A nurse or administrator is designated on paper as the authorized contact. They are given access to the resident's bank account. They submit financial activity reports to the facility. In most cases, a simple spreadsheet accounting for income and expenses, which are reviewed periodically by a compliance officer or administrator. That review is typically quarterly. In many facilities, it is annual. At Sunrise Manor, the financial monitoring was quarterly. It relied almost entirely on self-reported documentation from the designated staff contact. At the time Sandra Castillo joined the facility in 2015, she had no authority over any resident's finances. That changed in 2017, when a budget cut eliminated the position of dedicated resident financial coordinator. The responsibility was redistributed among senior nursing staff who demonstrated reliability and resident trust. Sandra Castillo was assigned 3 accounts, then 5, then 12. By 2019, she was the designated financial contact for 14 residents across the memory care and long-term skilled care wings. The system was built on one foundational assumption: that the person managing these accounts cared about the residents they were appointed to protect. It did not account for someone who had already begun to see those accounts as something else entirely. The first transaction came in March 2018. It was small, a $400 transfer from the account of Eleanor Marsh, an 84-year-old former librarian with mid-stage Alzheimer's, categorized in Sandra's monthly report as personal supplies. Eleanor needed depends, lotion, and a new pair of slippers. The receipt Sandra attached to the report was real. The total on it was $47. The remaining $353 went into Sandra's personal checking account. Eleanor Marsh did not notice. She was not capable of noticing. She called Sandra the nice young one and asked her most days whether her husband had called. Her husband had been dead for 11 years. Sandra was not caught, so she kept going. By mid-2018, the withdrawals had become routine. She had refined the method. She would submit legitimate-looking expense reports with real receipts attached, some authentic, some photographed, scanned, and digitally altered with amounts changed. Small enough amounts that no individual transaction stood out. Spread across multiple residents so no single account depleted too quickly. The amounts grew. In 2019, after being assigned control of 7 additional accounts following a staffing restructure, Sandra's monthly transfers crossed $15,000. She deposited them in increments, $2,000 here, $1,500 there, across 3 accounts at 2 different banks. By early 2020, the running total had passed $400,000. She upgraded her apartment. She paid off a car. She began purchasing clothing she would have described as an investment, not conspicuous luxury, but steady, quiet elevation. A better neighborhood. A newer SUV. Weekend trips to Sedona. A boat slip rental at a marina on Lake Havasu, shared with a boyfriend who assumed she had savings from years of nursing. In 2021, she made her most audacious move. She began submitting invoices to the facility billing system, not just to resident accounts, for services rendered to patients. Physical therapy aids, medical supply purchases, specialist copays. The invoices were fabricated. The vendors didn't exist. But the facility's billing administrator processed payments from resident trust accounts without verifying that the services had actually been performed. The oversight mechanism existed on paper. In practice, it had not kept pace with the volume of transactions Sandra controlled. By December 2022, the total exceeded $1 million. She had stolen more than $1 million from people who spent their days unable to remember what year it was. She had been managing some of their accounts for nearly 5 years. Not one external audit had been conducted. The beginning of the end came in February 2023. Not because of a whistleblower. Not because of a state inspection. But because of a daughter. Patricia Okafor, 47 years old, a tax accountant from Phoenix, was helping prepare the annual financial documents for her mother, Ruth Okafor, 79, a former school principal who had been a resident at Sunrise Manor for 3 years following a stroke that left her with significant memory impairment. Patricia did her mother's taxes every year. It was the one administrative task she had kept close, a way of maintaining connection to her mother's life even as that life contracted. When she requested bank statements from the account her mother hadn't been able to access on her own since 2020, what she received made her stop mid-sentence on a phone call she was in the middle of. She called back 3 times to confirm she had the right account. Her mother's savings, $94,000 the last time Patricia had checked in 2020, was down to $6,200. 3 years of Social Security deposits, a pension, and the proceeds of a property sale. Nearly $88,000. Gone. Patricia drove from Phoenix to Tucson the next morning. She walked into Sunrise Manor and asked to speak with the financial coordinator on record for her mother's account. She was given Sandra Castillo's name. Sandra was working a day shift. She was in the middle of medication rounds when the administrator found her. She came to the meeting room calm and professional. She had an explanation ready within 30 seconds. Fluctuating care costs, a temporary billing correction, a processing delay from a third-party vendor. Patricia Okafor listened to every word. Patricia Okafor had been a tax accountant for 22 years. She knew a fabricated explanation when she heard one. She left the meeting, drove to the parking lot, and called the Arizona Adult Protective Services hotline. The referral landed at the Pima County Attorney's Office Financial Exploitation Unit. Investigator Denise Tran was assigned the case on February 14, 2023. Within 3 weeks, she had subpoenaed the financial records of every resident account Sandra Castillo had ever been designated to manage. What she found across 23 accounts was a single consistent pattern. Regular small withdrawals, fabricated vendor invoices, altered receipts, and deposits into 3 personal bank accounts all registered to Sandra Lynn Castillo. The smoking gun was a notes app on Sandra's work iPad, found during a search of her locker. She had kept a running log of each resident's account balance, not for the facility, but for herself. Color-coded by account. Updated monthly. She had essentially maintained a personal ledger of how much she had left to take from each patient. March 8, 2023. A Thursday. 7:42 a.m. Sandra Castillo arrived at Sunrise Manor 11 minutes before her shift started. She always came early, which was one of the things her supervisors mentioned most in her reviews. She signed in at the front desk, exchanged a few words with the overnight charge nurse about a resident who'd had a difficult night, poured coffee from the break room pot, and walked toward the medication cart to begin her morning prep. She did not notice the 2 vehicles in the parking lot that had not been there the day before. Pima County Attorney's Investigator Denise Tran entered the building at 7:51 a.m., accompanied by a detective from the Tucson Police Department Economic Crimes Unit. Both were in plain clothes. Both had their credentials visible. Sandra was at the medication cart when she heard her name. Sandra. Sandra, step away from the medication cart. She looked up. She didn't recognize either of them. Excuse me, I'm in the middle of rounds. Investigator Tran moved toward her. We need to talk about the accounts. The ones you've been accessing after hours. I don't know what I'm a nurse. I've been here 9 years. Can someone? We have records from 23 resident accounts, Sandra. All designated to you. Her face changed. The professional calm shifted into something else. Not panic, exactly, but a kind of internal recalculation. She gripped the edge of the medication cart. These people trusted me. I was trying to help them. Investigator Tran looked at her steadily. Turn around, please. Hands behind your back. I need to finish my rounds. These residents need their medications. Someone has to. The facility is arranging coverage. You need to come with us. She was handcuffed at 7:56 a.m. 4 colleagues watched from the hallway. One of the residents in the nearest room, A 91-year-old man with dementia named Harold saw Sandra being walked past his doorway and called out her name and waved. She did not look at him. Her badge was surrendered at the front desk. Her access card was deactivated as she stood at the door. She was transported to the Pima County Adult Detention Complex and booked before 9 a.m. 31 charges were filed: 23 counts of financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, 6 counts of fraudulent schemes and artifices, and 2 counts of forgery. Before we get to sentencing, if this kind of accountability coverage matters to you, subscribe. We cover what mainstream media ignores every week. The Pima County Superior Court trial began October 3, 2023. Judge Maria Sandoval presiding. The prosecution was led by Senior Assistant County Attorney James Nguyen, a 17-year veteran of financial crime prosecution. The defense argued that Sandra had been overwhelmed by an inadequate oversight system, that the facility bore institutional responsibility for failing to audit accounts she controlled, and that she had not intended to cause lasting harm. Her attorney noted her 9 years of service, her spotless clinical record, and letters of support from families of residents she had genuinely cared for. Then the prosecution presented the victim impact statements. Dolores Vega, 77 years old, a retired seamstress, testified through her daughter Maria because Dolores could no longer string together a complete sentence. Maria read from a statement her mother had given investigators during a brief period of clarity 8 months earlier. "I worked my whole life. I kept that money for my funeral so my children would not have to worry. It is gone now. I don't understand where it went. I trusted the nurses here." Frank DeLuca, 82, a former electrician from Brooklyn who had moved to Tucson for his wife's health before outliving her by 7 years. He took the stand himself. Hands shaking slightly, jaw set firm. "I had $86,000 in that account. I've got $1,200 left. I can't afford my supplemental prescriptions anymore. My son is helping me, but he's got his own family. I'm not a man who asks his son for money." He paused. "I've never been a man who asks anyone for anything. I worked since I was 14 years old. And she took it." He did not look at the defendant. He did not need to. Ruth Okafor never testified. She had declined significantly by the time the trial began. Her daughter Patricia sat in the gallery for every single day of proceedings. The jury deliberated for 9 hours over 2 days. On October 19, 2023, they returned guilty verdicts on all 31 counts. Sentencing was held December 7, 2023. The courtroom was full. Judge Maria Sandoval addressed the defendant directly. "Ms. Castillo, these residents could not protect themselves. That is precisely why the law designates someone to do it for them. That is precisely why this community placed its trust in you. You were not just their nurse. You were their financial guardian. You were the person the law said would stand between them and exploitation. You were the exploitation. For 6 years, you accessed accounts belonging to men and women who could not track their own bank balances, who could not read their own statements, who could not call their own banks. You knew that. You relied on that. You chose your victims carefully, and you chose them because they could not fight back. 23 people. The youngest was 71. The oldest was 94. Combined, they had lived 847 years. They saved through wars, through recessions, through raising children and burying spouses. They saved carefully for decades, so that their final years might carry some dignity. You took that from them. Not in a moment of desperation. Over 6 years. With spreadsheets. This court sentences you to 14 years in the Arizona Department of Corrections, to be followed by 10 years of supervised probation. You are ordered to pay restitution in the full amount of $1,312,418 to the affected estates and families. You are permanently barred from employment in any healthcare, caregiving, or fiduciary capacity in the state of Arizona. Sandra Castillo showed no visible reaction. She was remanded immediately. Sandra Lynn Castillo is currently incarcerated at the Arizona State Prison Complex, Perryville in Goodyear, Arizona. She is eligible for release in 2034. She will be 52 years old. The boat at Lake Havasu has been repossessed. The SUV has been seized. The storage unit, with its $84,000 in goods, was liquidated as part of the restitution order. The proceeds covered less than 7% of what was owed. Frank DeLuca still lives at Sunrise Manor. His son now drives from Mesa twice a month to help him manage his prescriptions. Ruth Okafor passed away in April 2024. Patricia said her mother never fully understood what had happened, and she has decided that is a mercy. Harold, the 91-year-old resident who waved at Sandra on the morning of her arrest, still asks about the nice nurse. The staff tells him she had to go away for a while. Sunrise Manor settled a civil lawsuit brought by 14 families in August 2024. The facility implemented a full independent auditing system for all resident financial accounts, quarterly reviews by a licensed external CPA, and removed the ability for direct care staff to serve as sole authorized financial contacts. The changes came 6 years too late for 23 people who could not advocate for themselves.
Sandra Lynn Castillo, 41 years old. Licensed practical nurse at Sunrise Manor Care Facility in Tucson, Arizona. And in less than 30 seconds, she will be placed in handcuffs in front of a hallway of elderly residents she had been stealing from for 6 years.